Well, now that the flash and fury of the election is over, maybe it's time to take a look at something that's just about unique in American politics. That is, a president who wants to be reelected, who has all the delegates, nevertheless gets tossed off his ticket, and certainly not voluntarily. So, what we're looking at here, I don't care whether you call it a coup, I don't care whether you call it an overthrow, I don't care whether you call it a removal. What a nice term. Joe Biden did not want to leave the ticket, and he was forced to. So, sitting president does not want to go, and he's forced to. So let's take a look at what happened. Now, on June 27, 2024, candidates Biden and Trump faced off in debate. Okay, that date, that June 27th date, is important. No one picked that by throwing darts at a calendar. It is a very unusual date. The earliest previous presidential debate had been the Reagan-Anderson debate, which nobody remembers, of September 21st, 1980. So that makes the debate odd right off the track. Why? Because the Reagan-Anderson debate was 86 days later than the Trump-Biden debate. And, by almost 3 full months, this is the earliest debate in presidential history. And neither candidate had been officially nominated by that date. So, pointedly, if something had happened, a different candidate could be nominated. Well, as we know, something happened. Mark Halperin has pointed out, reporters had covered up Biden's diminishing acuity for, I'm not making this up, 7 years. And as Halperin points out, the White House staff had to have known too. Nobody did anything, at least not in public. There had been, however, persistent rumors that reporters, foreign leaders, and representatives had begun not just to suspect, but to privately acknowledge a steepening decline in Biden's mental acuity in the January-February period 2024. Of course, this is the Italian Prime Minister walking President Biden back to join the other leaders of the country, of the Western countries. It looked like he wandered off. I really don't think he did, but it certainly didn't look good. At some point, someone decided to get CNN involved. Now, unless the CNN decide on their own to expose Biden, which I think is pretty unlikely, there was an outside initiator or initiators. The execs at CNN, however, had to have known that Biden was faltering, if nothing else, from their own reporters. As heads of a major liberal network, they had to have suspected something from contacts or from direct exposure. It's hard to believe that CNN would not at some point, or the leaders of CNN would not at some point have interacted with Biden. That just doesn't seem to make any sense, and that's not how Washington operates. So the network internally had to reach an agreement on format, select host in a competitive environment, and work out a schedule. Under the best of circumstances, this simply could not have been done in a few days. Negotiations had to have involved both camps, even if one camp had initiated the process. Now, this would have taken up more days. I know Trump said he would debate Biden anytime, anywhere, under any circumstance. But in any circumstance, in political slang, can be a little complicated. So this didn't happen, just 1, 2, 3, make it happen. There had been some negotiations that went on. Some have speculated, foolishly I think, that the rules were so non-Trumpian that the real plan was to have Trump blow up. He does that fairly well. Back out and embarrass himself. Well, maybe. But such a tactic would, if you do it in late June, Trump would have had lots of time to recover. So this is a plan that would work much better in late September or in October. you know, in the real world, Trump's MAGA delegates were not about to leave him. So he was going to be the nomination of the Republican Party under almost any circumstance. Remember, he's already been convicted of 34 felonies at this point. He has already been charged in a civil suit with sexual assault. He's had tons of money stripped from him, not completely, of course, on what was basically a fraud suit brought by the New York Attorney General. Guess what? If your people are still with you after all that, they're with you. But besides the date, there were two true other peculiarities. One, no audience. Two, only the candidate answering would have a live microphone. People inside the Biden campaign had to have known what that would likely mean. With only one candidate's mic turned on at a time and with no audience, the individual response of each candidate, both verbal and physical, would be as brightly lit as though they were in front of searchlights suitable for Coast Guard search and rescue operations. Biden's team would have no hope of saying that Biden's lapses stemmed from Trumpian interruptions. If Trump's microphones are off, guess what? He's not interrupting. All this would have had to have been approved by the highest level of CNN management. I mean, this presidential debate is not a small thing. This had to have gone up to the very top executives. Now, they undoubtedly knew what these rules meant for Biden, which is that Biden was going to be exposed like a fly on the wall with a searchlight on it. But the time it takes for the CNN brass to actually approve all this would have taken a number of more days. Those closest to Biden, probably for months if not longer, knew that short of a miracle, Biden's performance in such a debate would be a disaster. An unmasked Biden, given his state of decline, was very likely to shock the American electorate. Right? That's exactly what happened. Taking all this into account, once explicitly initiated, it would have almost certainly have taken a month or more to reach the final announcement stage, spring. And with so many moving pieces, probably more than a month. Given that the announcement was made mid-May, the first formal steps to create the debate could not have been initiated any later than early or mid-April. Let's assume that the first concrete conceptualization would have been a month or so earlier than the formal process began, and then it would have gone through several iterations. I mean, I'm not sure that they knew what they were doing when they started out, and I think it probably became clearer as they worked things through. Was there a classic conspiracy? No, most certainly not. These things are hard to conceal. But there may have been a period of ad hoc steps that became concrete over time. Those close to Biden and to the process had to have known that in all likelihood, forces would be unleashed that would sweep Biden to one side. And that makes a respectable timeline. The noticing of a quickening decline in Biden sometime around January, February, then the formation of an intent to bring the decline into the open, then broaching the idea of an early debate to CNN, a liberal network who actually would be friendly to something like this. And of course, they too, as I've already pointed out, had to have been thinking along these lines. The internal details of the debate, the consultation with the camps, had to have been back in beginning sometime in April and in the in the middle of May. So then you had the debate, and then followed by the expected outcry. Finally, there had to have been concerted action by the big donors to cut off the cash flow to Biden and other Democratic campaigns. We may never know whether this coordination occurred before or after the June 27th debate. Nancy Pelosi says she helped pressure the donors only after the debate. Now, at this point, we have no reason to doubt her on this thing. She's a tough politician. She's a smart politician, and I don't know where the percentage would have been for her to take action before the debate. President Obama apparently did not attempt to halt the defections of donors and elected representatives. In fact, much was made of President Obama giving a green light to the pressure applied by George Clooney and his quick change of direction when he reported on Biden's functioning at a June 15th Hollywood fundraiser complete with celebrities and very important people. And so, this Obama apparently signed off on what Clooney was about to do. Now, that fundraising ceremony was on June 15th. The next day, June 16th, the New York Times published an upbeat review of Biden's performance. The previous night at the fundraiser, and I give you the two authors of that. And so, as a result, you can go look up it's a very positive review of Biden's performance on June 15th. After the debate, however, the Times quickly, within 10 days, published a letter from George Clooney, where George Clooney reversed himself, and Clooney's one of the organizers of the event. He reversed himself on Biden's performance at that fundraiser. Said Clooney in the letter, "But the one battle he cannot win is the fight against time. None of us can. It's devastating," said, "but the Joe Biden I was with 3 weeks ago at the fundraiser," and remember, Clooney gave him a lot of strokes for that fundraiser, said a lot of very nice things about him, that Joe Biden was not the Joe Big Fucking Deal Biden of 2010. He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. He was the same man we all witnessed at the debate. Well, if that's true, what the hell was Clooney doing saying all these nice things about somebody whom he knew should not be in the White House? I mean, this is almost pathological at this point. And I guess the idea was that the only person who could beat Trump was Biden, and even if Biden was having 3 or 4 hours a day when he could work, even if he drifted off, even if he was not focused, all that stuff, it's still better than Trump. I guess that was the working idea for Clooney. At about the same time as Clooney's letter hit the New York Times, the possible use of the 25th Amendment was raised. Now, such a drastic step could not have been raised without Vice President Harris's acquiescence. Just think about this. You bring up the 25th Amendment, and the Vice President says, "No, I'm not interested." Well, you've just been shot out of the sky. So this had the bringing up of the 25th Amendment within 10 days of the debate had to have been done with Vice President Harris's knowledge and agreement. Okay, she knew enough, according to Mark Halperin, to already begun her own search for a vice presidential candidate before Biden stepped down. Now, how much earlier did she know? I don't know, but it's hard for me to conceptualize that they set that early date, and they set that only one candidate would have a mic open, and that there'd be no audience, so there'd be no Trumpian pressure on Biden. All those strange, new and different rules that they used for this debate. It's hard to believe that at some level Harris was completely out of the loop. So how much did she know? Who knows? But certainly she had to have known. I mean, she keeps insisting that she was the last person to leave the room on major decisions, which is understandable. But she had to have known that there were times, probably extended times, when Biden was simply not up to the job. And then there's the Voice of America. The Voice of America, if I'm not saying this is coordinated, but whoever is doing all this, or the groups of people are doing all this, put on the Voice of America, which is our voice to the rest of the world, this question. I took this right off the website. can the 25th Amendment be used to replace Biden? So the Voice of America told people all around the world, that we were thinking of removing our president because he was incompetent. How in the world does that happen? Besides being grossly irresponsible, it borders right on the level of sedition. Is there any way to remove the president? I know what, we could use the 25th Amendment, and that's being said by an organ of the American government. What is going on out there? When did the vice president know that a determined attempt to force Joe out would be made? We've already talked about this, but that's a really good question. Did the First Lady wonder if even one more race might kill or cripple her husband? From what we have since learned, she had to have known that her husband was becoming more and more limited. Notably, she came forward immediately after the end of the debate, and as you saw, helped him off the stage. He had to go down, I think it was 2 steps. She helped him down. And just think about that. Usually at the end of the debate, some people swarm around the candidate, the family and close aides and stuff like that, and they pat the candidate on the back and they say what a great job they've done, even if they've done a terrible job. Biden went off the stage with Jill without the usual close circle gathering that occurs during debates. Now, there's all kinds of talk about what Jill was thinking. Nobody knows. Did she hope Joe would step aside? She fought like a tigress for Joe when he had he had 2 aneurysms burst in his brain in 1988, and he underwent actually 3 surgeries, 2 of them of some length to repair the aneurysms. And then they had a blood clot, which they had to remove, a fairly large blood clot. So whatever she may have said, whatever she may be implying, did she really want her husband to run that next time? I don't know. And we may never find out, but it certainly is another good question. There are so many good questions, in fact. But let's start with something simple. Who suggested a pre-convention date, and who thought up the idea of the candidate being under the brightly lit microscope format? Who initiated this whole process? Will probably tell us a great deal about the overthrow of not President Biden, but candidate Biden. This is a good place to start, and we can go from there.